Oh my god, I can't believe it, guys. Kang the Conqueror's coming. Who? How's it hanging, YouTube? It's Peter here, your Ginger Geordie Geek. Welcome back to the channel. So you've probably seen the announcement about Avengers, the KANG Dynasty, and you've got tons of questions, I'm sure. So, do you want to know more? Would you like to learn more about Kang? Well, you're in the right place because I'm here to help. Let's delve straight in to who the hell is Kang the Conqueror. So, first thing to note is Kang is actually 4 characters. That's right, there's 4 different versions of him. Well, actually there's more, but we'll get to that in a bit. The ones you're interested in are Kang the Conqueror, Mortis, Ramatut, and the Scarlet Centurion. Let's have a look at each of them individually. So, starting off with Ramatut. This guy first appeared in Fantastic Four 19 back in 1963. His original origin had him linked to being a descendant of Doom in some way, but it turns out that's not true. He's actually Nathaniel Richards, a future descendant of Reed Richards from the 31st century. Nathaniel Richards finds Doom's time technology and travels back in time in a giant Sphinx-shaped ship. Sphinx ship. Anyway, he fights the FF, then goes back to the future and makes himself some armour based on Doom's armour and starts calling himself the Scarlet Centurion. More on him later on. Ramatut then decides that he's had enough of all that jazz and he heads back to the 31st century, but he ballses it up and overshoots by about 1,000 years, arriving in a war-torn Earth. He decides he's going to conquer it and the galaxy, and that is basically the birth of Kang. Okay, back to the Scarlet Centurion. His first appearance was Avengers King Size Special number 2 back in 1968. Basically, this is a version of Ramatut who develops some Doom-like armour and decides to jump through time fighting the Avengers as you would. Basically, Ramatut regards his time as the Scarlet Centurion as an absolute failure and resumes the Ramatut identity at some point. There is a divergent timeline in which a more successful Scarlet Centurion has various battles with people like the Squadron Supreme, etc. It's worth pointing out that the Scarlet Centurion identity and a similar armour is used again in the future by Marcus, who is the son of Kang the Conqueror. Okie dokie, so Mortis, this is where it gets complicated. Mortis' first appearance was Avengers 10 back in 1964. He basically is a future version of Ramatut and Kang. In the future, Kang, who is becoming Ramatut again, basically gets bored. He gets weary of battle and all the fighting and things like that, and he's depressed because his son, the Scarlet Centurion, is being killed. So he decides that he's going to hang it all up and not be a conqueror anymore. At this point, he's approached by the Timekeepers at the end of time and asked to become their agent, preserving timelines rather than conquering them. And in exchange for that, they're going to give him immortality. So Ramatut becomes Mortis, Lord of Limbo. He's got a very long, convoluted comic history in terms of manipulating the Avengers, deleting timelines, trying to overthrow the Timekeepers, and so on. It gets very, very complex. He's always fighting with other versions of himself who don't want to become him. Basically, to see him as kind of the failed version of Kang the Conqueror, and Kang strongly objects to becoming this bureaucrat as he sees it. Also, just to say, he's died and come back a stupid amount of times. Okay, last but probably most important is Kang the Conqueror, who first appeared in Avengers 8 back in 1964. As mentioned, Ramatut went to the future. Now that future Earth apparently is dying. So Kang decides he's got a bit of a taste for conquering, so he heads back into the past and starts basically conquering various versions of the Earth, various timelines and realities. He has numerous conflicts with people like the Avengers. He loves the battle and he loves the excitement, and he appears in all kinds of different comic series. He's basically becoming a regular thorn in the side for the MCU and the Avengers, most notably appearing in Secret Wars, Avengers Forever and the Celestial Madonna saga. Basically, Kang shows up all over the place to test the Avengers and have a good old fight and try and become the master of all time. So basically what we end up with is multiple versions of the same character. We've got Kang, Scarlet Centurion, Mortis and Ramatut, and these guys basically intersect left, right and centre all over the Marvel Universe all throughout time. They quite often have a bit of a fight because each one thinks they're the best version of the character and doesn't like what's happened to the other one or how they've turned out. But wait, there's more. There's another version of Kang in the form of Iron Lad. Iron Lad first appeared in Young Avengers #1, and basically this is Kang as a young guy before he became Kang the Conqueror, so starting off very early in his kind of lifeline. This guy travels to the Avengers timeline when the Avengers have been lost and forms a new group of Avengers called the Young Avengers. I've seen Avengers a lot, which are basically there to try and help the world, but more importantly to stop him from developing to become Kang in the future. At first his team don't know he's Kang, but they later find out. Dun dun dun! By now, for anything like me, your mind's blown, and I haven't even covered stuff like the bloody Council of Kangs. It's mental! Anyway, let's try and get into the timeline in a little bit more detail. Brace yourself, it's gonna get even more confusing. Okay, here we go. So, first Kang is born, let's call him Baby Kang. A version of him splits off and becomes Iron Lad, who knows of his future, so tries to stop himself from becoming the Conqueror. Normal Kang, Baby Kang, becomes Ramatut, who later becomes Scarlet Centurion in one reality, who dies of old age. Oh, bless him. If he doesn't become the Scarlet Centurion, or another version of him, he goes on to become Kang the Conqueror, who battles the early Avengers, and he's in all those early Avengers issues. One variant of him splits off and spawns multiple divergent Kangs, who he kills, and he becomes Prime Kang. If he doesn't do that, and he sticks to his normal timeline, Baby Kang becomes Prime Kang anyway, and forms the Council of Kangs. If he splits off, me bloody head, man. Let's try this again. So, Baby Kang, who's formed the Council of Kangs, splits off and remains in limbo. He basically lives there and has a bit of a life and nice party and all that kind of jazz. He then encounters the Council of Cross-Time Kangs, and he's bumped off by Nebula. Swine. If Baby Prime doesn't do that, he stays in his normal timeline and he flees limbo and forms Chronopolis. Anyway, he becomes a Mortis and he stays there until he gets basically bored, and then he decides, you know what, I'm going to go back to being Ramatut. Or he has two more diversions at that point, one of which becomes Kang the Conqueror and basically continues battling on. Other version is he becomes a Mortis and accepts his destiny as, I don't know, a Mortis, Master of Time. Well, go guys, I'm sure that's cleared it up perfectly for you, and now you've got a full understanding of Kang. Basically, think Rick and Morty. He's basically lots of versions of the same character spread throughout time. What does this mean then for the Avengers movies, and in particular, Avengers the KANG Dynasty? Well, we've already seen Kang introduced in the Loki TV show. We know that introduced the concept of multiple realities in different worlds. We met Kang for the first time, superbly played. He was a bit of a benevolent character, but he looked tremendous. We also found out about, lots of different variations within the timeline and the galaxies, and lots of different versions of the same character. Kang did warn us that he was the nice version of Kang, and that if they got rid of him, there would be other versions and we wouldn't like them. So is that hinting at lots of versions of Kang, as we've seen earlier in the video? Who knows? We might see multiple versions of Kang spread throughout all of reality, each with different personalities. We know Kang's appearing next in Quantumania, the Wasp and Ant-Man movie, and he looks tremendous. So, lots of exciting stuff Kang related in the future. I'm sure you've got lots of questions. If you have, please pop them in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer them. Please do like and subscribe to my video, and I'll catch you next time.